So every year we hear about multiple large data breaches occurring across all different types of organizations, even sometimes organizations that hold critical infrastructure for the public. Just this year, Facebook had a data breach affecting about 500 million users. Bonobos had a breach affecting 7 million users. Colonial Pipeline paid a ransom of 2.3 million in Bitcoin after its supply chain was brought to a halt, amongst many other security breaches. 2021 is on track to have the largest number of data breaches in history, with the total number of cyber attack-related data compromises so far this year up 27% compared to 2020, according to the Identity Theft Resource Center. Not only do these cyber attacks cause organizational chaos, they also incur steep penalties. In 2017, Equifax had to pay $575 million for its data breach. In 2018, Uber had to pay close to $150 million. While companies may have all the desire in the world to boost cybersecurity initiatives to avoid this, knowing where and how to start is important. In February 2013, Barack Obama issued an executive order improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity, ordering NIST to create a voluntary framework to reduce cybersecurity risk on critical infrastructure. On July 28, 2021, Joe Biden signed a memorandum ordering CISA and NIST to create benchmarks for organizations managing critical infrastructure. So what is NIST? NIST is one of the nation's oldest physical science laboratories and provides many different standards and frameworks. Here we can see that the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is just one of the many different frameworks NIST has, as well as the resources in the other areas that they provide. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is broken down into three key components: the core, the profile, and the tiers. In this webinar, I'll be highlighting how we can use TOGAF and NIST and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework to reduce your cybersecurity risk and avoid getting added to the long list of data breaches over the year. So now we'll stop and learn a little about how our organization can assess your cyber risks. So in January 2016, the Open Group published the TOGAF Security Guide. The security architecture and risk management techniques outlined allow us to track and manage our cybersecurity concerns. We can use TOGAF to identify, assess, and mitigate these risks before starting so that it can be tracked throughout the transformation effort. Security architecture does not live in isolation. Security and risk is present in all phases of the architecture development method and contains connections to other components in our architecture. Here we can see how enterprise architecture and security architecture relate to each other, including the key deliverables and concepts that are used. Here we can see how cyber risk management fits into the overall risk management framework. Risk can be seen at any level of the business stack, but cyber risk management mainly lies in the information and technology architectures. Here we can see different risk analysis methods and how they can be applied to the different portions of the ADM. We can see NIST appears as a risk analysis method for the information system, technology, and opportunities and solution phases of the ADM. The security and risk concepts from the TOGAF Security Guide can be integrated into the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, providing information that will be highly useful to security architects. So here we can see how the NIST CSF fits onto the different levels of cybersecurity coverage that you can have. If you want to make it more specific, you can go with the NIST 853 at a low baseline, ISO 27000, NIST 853 at a moderate baseline. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is more high level in its scope compared to existing frameworks. It focuses on how to access and prioritize security functions and references existing documents like NIST 853, COVID-5, and ISO 27000 for more detail on how to implement specific controls and processes. So NIST 853 is a layer of detail that can rest on top of the NIST CSF. So here we can see that the NIST 853 standard contains the NIST CSF, and if you'd like to go another level of detail, you can use the SCF. Choosing a level of coverage is going to depend on organizational need and compliance requirements. So if you choose the NIST framework, you'll first have to align your organization to the framework core. The framework core consists of 5 functions, which are the 5 basic cybersecurity functions at the highest level. These 5 functions are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. These functions are further divided into categories, which are further divided into subcategories. Categories are groups of cybersecurity outcomes tied to programmatic needs and particular activities, such as asset management and supply chain risk management. These subcategories are specific outcomes of technical or management activities. So here we can see another example. Note how the ID of the subcategories are numbered versions of the category ID. And then using NIST 853, each of these subcategories are mapped to a specific control. A control can be viewed as descriptions of the safeguards and protection capabilities appropriate for achieving the particular security and privacy objectives. So now we'll learn how we can spot our cyber risks by doing a risk assessment. So TOGAF allows for basic risk analysis and assessment. Risk in TOGAF has 2 levels. The initial level, which is the risk categorization prior to determining and implementing mitigating actions, and the residual risk, which is risk categorization after implementation of mitigating actions. Risk can be classified according to the frequency and effect in accordance with the organization. Combining effect and frequency allows us to create a risk identification and mitigation worksheet. While there are no hard and fast rules to measuring effect and frequency, the following criteria comes from existing risk management best practices. Some things to consider when determining the effect of a risk are the number of users, the complexity of the object, and the criticality of the object to core business needs. The risk mitigations here are the identification, planning, and conduct of actions that will reduce the risk to an acceptable level. The mitigation could range from a simple monitoring, and/or acceptance of the risk to a complete contingency plan. After identifying the mitigation plan, you can assess the impacts of the risk both before and after the mitigation efforts to see whether they've made an acceptable difference, starting with the ones with the highest impact first. It is important to make sure that the mitigation plan actually reduces the corporate impact instead of moving it to another quadrant in our risk matrix, or else the mitigation plan may need to be revisited. One way to assess risk is to use security surveys. Surveying the appropriate owners will allow you to assemble the information you need to assess the effect and frequency of risks on the respective architectural components. Here we have an example of a security assessment being done on an application, with the risk questions being answered on a scoring basis. We can then apply algorithms and calculations on these scores, which will allow us to identify any technical or operational risks and do analysis on overall trends in our enterprise. In order to assess how our organization is meeting cybersecurity measures according to NIST, we need to create something called a profile. A profile is the alignment of functions, categories, and subcategories with the business requirements and objectives of the organization. Profiles are used to describe the current state or the desired target state of our cybersecurity activities. Here we can see each of the subcategories mapped to certain cybersecurity objectives we have for our organization. And then we can then use implementation tiers to assess how our organization views risk in our current profile, and to outline where the organization needs to be in the target profile. So the current profile indicates the cybersecurity outcomes that are currently being achieved, and the target profile indicates the outcomes needed to achieve desired cybersecurity risk management goals. Implementation tiers provide context on how an organization views cybersecurity risk and the processes in place to manage that risk. Starting with Tier 1, which is partial, meaning that cybersecurity practices are not formalized and there is limited awareness at an organizational level, to Tier 4, which is adaptive, meaning the organization adapts its cybersecurity practices based on previous and current cybersecurity activities. And there is an organization-wide approach to managing cybersecurity risk that uses risk-informed policies, processes, and procedures to address potential cybersecurity events. We can also use the NIST 853 standard to further align our enterprise architecture to the CSF. Here, we've taken all of our security controls and aligned them to the proper security category and established which baseline it's a part of. Once we've established a baseline of controls, we can categorize our controls. Here, we've taken all of our applications and aligned them with the security controls relevant to them. We've then assigned a security categorization to each of these applications. The security categorization is the process of determining information criticality and sensitivity on our information systems. These work well in a technical environment where information system needs to be classified in order to determine the security requirements that apply. Here we can see how each of these security objectives are determined. So we can use these definitions to assess how our own information systems handle data. We can then use this categorization to conduct an analysis of the impact of different incidents on different data and information system. NIST defines 3 impact levels, which is chosen based on the highest impact level from the security objectives. Once you've conducted this risk assessment, you can further tailor your controls and document a plan to improve your policies and procedures. Now we'll go into how we can defend our organization through analysis. After conducting our risk assessment, we can analyze and monitor them via dashboards. This dashboard shows our risk register with some relevant attributes along with some different charts to help monitor our risk. The risk register allows us to track how our organization is approaching this risk and the validation status, and then we can also use it in conjunction with some of our visualizations and track time frame, impact, and trend in our risks. Here we can see our risks broken down on this bubble chart by their impact and their frequency, which will allow us to zone in on those risks with high impacted frequency. In the NIST framework, once we have scored our priorities, we can use these scores to do a gap analysis between our current profile and target profile. Here we can see some statistics comparing our baseline security score and target security score, allowing us to track our progress as we implement cybersecurity measures. We can also individually track the security gap in our individual missions objectives. For example, here we can see that our missions with the largest gaps are passing required audits and maintain operational security, allowing us to rearrange our resources to mitigate the associated risks more. We can also do analysis of how our organization views cybersecurity through the lens of implementation tiers. So here we can see most of our baseline is aligned with tiers 2 and 3, but a large amount is still in the partial tier. We can then zone in on these specific subcategories and see where we need to take next steps. For example, here we can see that we have a large gap on our network integrity, and we can begin to take steps to mitigate this. Another important factor in cyber risk management is end-of-life management. Softwares that reach obsolescence face a high number of security vulnerabilities that introduce a large amount of risk and can get especially pricey when the need for post-retirement support contracts arise. Here we can see a couple different visualizations that help us track applications reaching end of life, allowing us to react proactively to the technology lifecycle. Another important aspect of cyber risk management is complexity. Retiring old technology must be balanced with making sure that the enterprise can run smoothly while going through this business transformation. This visualization shows our process complexity plotted along the end of life. We can use this information to make sure we get ahead of the curve upgrading our highly critical applications. We can also use our enterprise architecture to see the dependencies of our applications and how different risks might ripple through our organization. Here, we've taken an app and expanded on the entire solution diagram for it. We can see which business capabilities are dependent on it, which will allow us to further assess the business impact, and we can see which servers and databases it depends on, which will allow us to see the technology impact. Not understanding the different dependencies in your architecture can lead to a snowball effect when a risk scenario comes to life. So, in conclusion, TOGAF allows for basic risk analysis, while NIST can provide more robust controls to further develop your cybersecurity risk coverage. Once you do this risk analysis, you'll be able to see the ripple effects that a cybersecurity disaster might have on your organization. Hopefully, using these methods, you'll be able to help your organization evaluate, mitigate, and monitor cyber risks for your organization. Okay, and now we have some links to some different support channels that you can take. You can join our community on LinkedIn, Twitter, and the Knowledge Portal, as well as contacting us at abacus@avolutionsoftware.com.
Thank you, Kishan. Appreciate that. Actually, you were quite a lot quicker than we thought you would be. So we do have time for questions. I don't actually see any coming in on the Q&A channel. Let me just take a look here. Oh yeah, we do have a couple that have come in. So let's go through them. So the first one I can see is from Cami Toribio. The question is, what portion of the ADM is the risk impact matrix produced in?
Okay, yep. So risks are going to be present throughout the ADM. The risk impact matrix is going to be produced mainly in phase G, the implementation and governance phase.
Okay, we have another question here from Philip Gallagher. Do you feel that all enterprise architects can benefit from studying cybersecurity? My answer to that would definitely be yes, but over to you, Kishan.
Yes, I would say yes. Taking an enterprise-wide approach to cybersecurity management is going to be important to make sure that you're covered in all aspects. So we can implement specific controls in different places in our enterprise architecture. But having a holistic view of your cybersecurity practices is going to be very useful.
Fantastic. I see no other questions. Folks, can I remind you, please feel free to put them into the Q&A channel, or if you can't find the Q&A channel, you're more than welcome to put questions into the chat channel. Whilst we're waiting, just in case any more do come in, I see a couple of people have put a question in the channel asking about the presentation itself. This presentation is being recorded, and the recording together with a PDF version of the slide deck will be made available in the Open Group library after the event. We have to do some post-event edits, but you will receive, as a registered attendee, information on how to access that material within the next couple of days, probably early next week. So whilst I've been speaking, we've got a couple more questions coming in. So, okay. Can you recommend any specific training path for EAs on cybersecurity?
Right. So NIST has published its controls on its website. So they do have a lot of training material as well on how you can implement the NIST cybersecurity framework with your enterprise architecture. So I would definitely start with the resources that NIST has published.
Okay, there's another one here. Is cyber resilience integrated into enterprise architecture in the same way?
Right. Yeah, so cyber resilience and managing your cyber risks are going to go hand in hand. As you manage your cyber risks, you'll be able to understand where the different weak points are in your security architecture, and build that cyber resilience.
Okay, we have one that's specific here to product. Can Abacus leverage algorithms to compare current and target properties to find which ones have the biggest gap?
Yep. So Abacus does allow for those sort of visual algorithms. So you can create no-code algorithms with Abacus that will allow you to conduct those sorts of gap analysis and do those calculations.
Okay, with one that's come in via chat, so thank you for the person who put it into the Q&A channel. How would you implement security management in agile project delivery?
Right. So conducting that risk analysis and then assessing which risks are going to have the highest impact in your architecture, and then taking those and breaking those down into sprints will allow you to kind of take an agile approach to managing your security architecture.
Okay, and what may be the final one, unless any more come in whilst I'm speaking, from Mark Carter. Is there a way to incorporate the NIST categories, controls, etc. into Abacus? Is there a template within Abacus that allows us to get started?
Right. So yeah, we do have a template coming available soon. We can circle back with you later and discuss that.
Okay, and yet another. Are EA frameworks like TOGAF compatible with modern cybersecurity requirements? I mean, that's a much wider question and it takes us into the TOGAF area, but maybe you have some views on that.
Right. So yeah, it is totally going to be compatible. We saw a little bit earlier about how we can integrate TOGAF and NIST. So the TOGAF allows for different types of risk management built into the framework. So I'll go ahead and go with this slide here that'll kind of demonstrate that. So here we have the TOGAF ADM on the left-hand side, along with some of the different risk analysis methods. So we can implement the NIST cybersecurity controls and everything here in our different ADM phases.
Okay, great, excellent. That looks like that's all of them. I appreciate your clarity there, Kishan, and for covering all of those questions. Okay.